Welcome, parents, to our last installment in this video series. This one today is going to be about changing unhelpful thought patterns. So I think we will start with our mindfulness, as we have been doing throughout this video series. And today we're going to repeat the mindfulness practice that was about leaves on a stream. And that's because we are going to be talking about thoughts today. And this particular practice is about kind of letting go of thoughts and not getting too wrapped up in them. So settle in the way we usually do for a mindfulness practice. And I want you to have your feet flat on the floor, your hands resting in your lap. Take a couple of slow, deep breaths. And for this practice, you can either gaze at the screen, which of course has a photo of a stream on it, or you can close your eyes and imagine a beautiful, slow-moving stream. You can see how the water flows around rocks and around trees. Maybe it descends downhill and travels through a valley. And once in a while you're watching the stream, a big leaf drops into the stream and floats away. And imagine you're sitting beside that stream on a warm, sunny day, watching the leaves float by. Once you have that picture in your mind, start to become conscious of your thoughts. So each time a thought pops into your head, imagine that it's written on one of those leaves. If you think in words, put them on the leaf as words. If you think in images, put them on the leaf as an image. The goal is to stay beside the stream, allow the leaves on the stream to keep flowing by. Don't try to make it go faster or slower. Don't try to change what shows up on the leaves in any way. If the leaves disappear, or if you go somewhere else mentally, or if you find that you're in the stream or on a leaf, just stop and notice that this has happened. File that knowledge away, and then once again, return to the stream. Watch a thought come into your mind. Write it on a leaf and let the leaf float away downstream. I'll let you do this for just a minute or two now. And so as we come to the end of this exercise, just watch the last couple of leaves float down the stream and out of view. And then you can gently open your eyes and have a little stretch if you like. So again, that one is about not becoming fused with our thoughts and letting our brains kind of run away with a thought pattern that might become quite unhelpful. And that's what we're going to talk about more today. So we are going to talk about changing unhelpful thought patterns. And this one, it will be helpful, I think, for everybody. I think it's generally helpful for anybody, whether you're a parent of a child with Down syndrome or not. But it will be crucial for some of you. So some people definitely have a lot of unhelpful thought patterns. And if you think by the end of this that you might be one of those people, then this might be an area that you want to pay a bit more attention to, for sure. So just a few definitions to start off with. So one being self-talk. So self-talk is just basically, the stuff that's going, what you're saying to yourself while your child is doing things that are problematic to you, or while you're kind of watching yourself do parenting tasks. These are things that you say to yourself, the kind of internal dialogue that's going on. What happens is that oftentimes there are unhelpful patterns of thought, or what are also known as thinking traps. So basically, some of these thoughts you have are really unhelpful or problematic, and they sabotage your ability to parent effectively. So this is an arm of, we were talking about in the last few videos, positive behavior support strategies, and that's a form of behavioral therapy. This now, when we're talking about thought patterns, is actually adding in just the cognition piece, and that's where we get this cognitive behavior therapy from. So these CBT principles are actually really helpful. They're not just for people who are experiencing high levels of anxiety or depression. Of course, they're helpful for those things too, but actually all of us can benefit from the principles around CBT. There's definitely, this is used by sports psychology and for insomnia and all sorts of things. So it's a really useful set of principles to get a handle on for most people. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is this kind of thinking piece. So here are some examples of problematic thought patterns. These are some of the thinking traps I was just talking about. And I won't go through, I'll let you sort of look at them. I'm not going to go through them all in detail. I'm going to pull out a couple that I think are really common for a lot of us. So one being overgeneralizing. So this is basically saying something like, oh, you make a mistake and you say to yourself, I always do that. Or you watch your husband or your wife do something and you say to them, you always do it that way. And that's likely not true, right? So we have this tendency to kind of overgeneralize, which is not super helpful. A couple other ones here that are favorites of parents and people who have spouses, definitely. If you look at the jumping to conclusions pattern, so that pattern of mind reading, imagining that we know what someone else is thinking, that is a really common one for couples. Because if you imagine, your partner comes home and he or she looks they look a little bit grumpy and they don't talk to you, they're really quiet. And you think to yourself, oh, he or she must be mad at me. I obviously did something wrong. And then where your thought pattern goes from there. It goes in a really unhelpful direction. So, but what if it's not that at all? What if you've actually completely misinterpreted it? And it's likely just that your spouse had a really long day, or something really crummy happened right at the end of the day that made their face look a little bit grumpy. Another one here is catastrophizing. So this is one I think a lot of us during COVID have been doing. I know I've kind of talked about this with some of my coworkers and friends that, as soon as you get sort of the sniffles, or you have a little bit of a tickle in your throat and you think, oh no, it's finally got me. And then you start feeling some other phantom symptoms going on inside your body. And again, your mind blows it out of proportion, essentially. So that's something that probably a lot of us can relate to right now. So why do we want to think about thought patterns around parenting your kids and, the stress of around parenting and, you know, your kids' problem behavior? Well, it's because how you think about parenting or how you think about your child's problem behavior impacts your parenting behavior. And what it does is it affects how effectively you deal with tough situations. So the aim always in anything I do when I'm talking to parents is to increase your confidence in parenting skills. So, you know, that's kind of the aim. And if we can do that by tackling some of these unhelpful thought patterns, then that's going to be a good idea. The other thing here is to know, just for all of you who are watching these videos, there's lots of parents who are watching these videos, and almost all of you will be having some of these unhelpful thoughts. And I think it's, again, just comforting to know that you're not the only one out there that has these kinds of things going on. And then there's also research to back this up. So there was a study done by Durand and Heinemann a few years ago where they looked at the effectiveness of reframing unhelpful thoughts, which we'll get to in a minute, with parents of kids with developmental disabilities who are also engaging in severe, challenging behavior. And they gave the parents just positive behavior support training. And then they also gave another set of parents positive behavior support training plus this CBT component, or how can I start to think more positively about my parenting practices. And that was more effective than just learning the strategies alone. So here is basically what we're looking at when we think about cognitive behavior therapy. This is what's known as the CBT Triad. So what this is essentially saying is that your thoughts, your feelings or emotions, and your behavior or actions are all inextricably linked. And you can see that all of the arrows go both ways. Okay, so you can start anywhere in this and you can go in either direction. So I'll give you a quick example. You know, maybe I start thinking about cookies and that makes me feel happy. So then I go and eat one, right? So that's the example there where I went from thought to feeling to behavior, right? But what if I start with, I just see some cookies, I eat one. So that's my behavior. But then I think to myself, oh man, I already had like 8 croissants this morning and a piece of chocolate cake. I really shouldn't have had that cookie. And then that makes me feel not good, right? Crummy, disappointed in myself. I'd probably be beating myself up a little bit. So even that one behavior of eating a cookie can be perceived in different ways, right? So that's just an example, a silly example of what kinds of things can go on inside our heads that impact our emotions and our behavior. So here's another example that hopefully a lot of us can relate to. So basically, again, our thoughts influence our feelings and our behavior. And so if we take person A, who's thinking to themselves, oh, I'm so tired right now. It was such a busy day. I can just exercise tomorrow. And then person B thinks to themselves, I had a really long day, but I always feel better after I exercise. I'll just do 20 minutes. Okay, so obviously, which person is going to be more likely to go do the exercise? It's going to be person B, right? So they're probably going to feel a little bit better about going to do it. They're going to feel kind of pumped about it. Whereas person A, and they're probably going to go do it, person A is likely by having this kind of thought pattern going on inside their head, has likely just succeeded in making themselves feel more tired and definitely less likely to complete the behavior of exercising. So a lot of us are really in tune with our internal dialogue, the kinds of things that are going on inside our heads. Some of us not so much. So you may have to kind of train yourself to do this, to become more aware of your thought patterns. And as I said, for others of us, this is really natural. If it's not natural for you, what you want to do is when you notice a kind of shift in your mood, ask yourself this question: what was I just thinking about? And you want to do this when there's no external cause for the shift in your mood. So if I handed one of you a $100 bill, obviously that would cause a shift in your mood, probably to make you feel happy, right? And so that makes sense, right? That wasn't necessarily caused by something going on inside your brain. What I'm saying is, say you're washing dishes, okay, or you're driving. This is often when these kinds of things happen, right? When we're doing these kind of automatic tasks, and you will notice you're feeling kind of okay, and then you start to feel sad, or you start to feel anxious about something. That's when you want to clue into what was going on inside my head right now? Were you just ruminating about the parent-teacher conference that you had earlier that day? Were you just thinking about how you couldn't get your kid up, off the floor and out the door in time this morning? And then, it was just really frustrating. What was going on inside your head? That's what you want to think about there. And that will kind of start cluing you into what kinds of things you're thinking about that are making you feel certain ways. So here are specifically some patterns of thought that parents of children with developmental disabilities tend to have about their children. So you can, see this, there's quite a few different things on this list. I'll just highlight a couple of them. So one being that issue of control. So, does the parent view, is their perspective that their child can control their own behavior or not? Because that will change how you feel about that and how you think about that. It'll change how you interpret various situations, whether the child is able to control their own behavior. How the parent views the future. Are you a parent who tends to be quite optimistic about the future? Are you a parent who just doesn't think about it at all, and so it's kind of neutral at this point? Are you a parent who's really pessimistic about the future? These are definitely thought patterns that can be either helpful or unhelpful for parents. And then another one I just want to draw your attention to is this idea of who's responsible for a given problem situation. So an example here would be, if there was kind of a child and teacher scenario at school, if you think a situation is the responsibility of the educational assistant or the teacher, that will change how you interact with school personnel, versus if you think it's your child who's responsible for that situation. So if your child had bolted out of the room earlier in the day and nobody could find him for, 20 minutes, do you say to yourself inside your head, oh, well, they can't look after him, 24/7, or they can't, keep their eyes on him every single moment of every single day. Those kinds of things are going to happen. My kid does have a tendency to take off. Or are you going to view it as, my child or the teacher should have been paying attention, or the SEA should have been paying more attention? That will color how you then talk to the people at the school about the situation later. And neither is right or wrong, but think about which one might be more helpful, right, in a given situation. So yeah, which one will help you in your interactions with the school, be more productive in your interactions. So other specific examples then that parents may have running around inside their brains. Everyone is staring at me. If your child is doing something naughty inside or around in a public place, it's my fault my child is behaving badly. I should be doing more for her. I feel like that one is a really, really prominent one for, I would say, most parents. In my experience, most parents have this thought, at least occasionally, when you are raising a child with a developmental disability. Things are just getting worse. My child will always be dependent on me. I can't help my child. I should be more patient. That's another really common one for sure. The thing is, some of these may even be true, but that doesn't mean that they're helpful, right? And so A lot of them, though, are not entirely true. And they definitely all fall definitively into that category of beating yourself up. And that doesn't influence your behavior as a parent in a good way. So I'm going to take you through just a couple of quick examples here. So with our CBT Triad and how this kind of plays out. So the scenario in this first example is that a dad has been given a great deal of reading and speech therapy homework to do with his daughter. He has the thought, as he leaves the therapist's office, he thinks, oh, I should be doing more for her. And that makes him feel inadequate, sad, guilty, not very good things. And actually, it has the opposite effect that he would probably want, right? Those emotions and that thought have now caused him to, and this is a very reasonable outcome here, help their child less with the academic and speech homework, because we tend to avoid situations that make us uncomfortable, right? And he's now feeling quite uncomfortable. So there's one example. Another example is more of a community scenario, and I'm sure maybe pre-COVID, a lot of parents are familiar with this example or something very much like it. A mom is at Walmart with her son. He's lying on the floor and yelling because she told him he couldn't have a toy, and she thinks everyone is staring at us, and she feels embarrassed and she feels angry at herself and her child, and the behavior again is not great, right? Then she's just going to avoid public places with her son and just not take him out. She's going to go to Walmart by herself, which isn't great, right? Because that's probably inconvenient a lot of the time. It's not good for the kid because he should learn how to be able to go to these kinds of stores and behave appropriately. So how can we have helpful thoughts? There are a couple of different ways. You may, as I've said, you may have to start with increasing your awareness, right, of the fact that you are having either helpful or unhelpful thoughts. And it can be really hard to focus on the positive. We talked about this with regard to watching your children's behavior as well. We do have tendency as human beings to focus on the negative. And so switching your awareness to focusing on the positive and how you can keep that central in your mind is going to be important here. So a couple of different ways you can have helpful thoughts. One is reframing. So this is essentially a different or more positive perspective on an unhelpful thought, and affirmations, which are essentially being your own cheerleader. And we'll go through each one of these. So one thing you can do to as I said, sometimes unhelpful thoughts are true, but still unhelpful. Sometimes, in fact, probably most often, unhelpful thoughts are not even true. And so I often do this when I'm working with my teens and adults with Down syndrome who, but of course this applies to all of us. But the way I often do it with them is when they're having these kind of unhelpful things going on, is I say, be a detective. Like, what's the evidence for whether that thought is actually true? That person doesn't like you, or I'm not a great person. Let's think about the evidence for and against these kinds of thoughts. So basically what you want to do here is put your thoughts on trial, right? And these are some of the questions you can ask yourself with some of the thoughts that you're having. So maybe just jotting down 2 or 3 thoughts after we're done with this video, or you can pause it and do it now if you happen to be one of those people who's really aware and what kinds of thoughts you have, that you can just pause it now and jot them down. But once you've jotted them down, go through some of these questions and ask yourself, am I misinterpreting this? Are there other interpretations that are possible? What evidence do I have for it? Am I basing this on thoughts or facts or feelings? That kind of thing. That will be helpful in kind of disputing some of the things, because our brains lie to us a lot. Actually, they're not always truthful when you're having these kinds of thought patterns. So some specific examples of the examples that we covered before, of ones that are really common for a lot of parents, this idea of I should be doing more for her, which is really common, reminding yourself I'm doing the best I can under the circumstances, or we accomplished a lot already today. And that's actually a really powerful one, is to always remind yourself, like when you say something like, I can't handle this right now, like the bottom example there, or I can't help my child, reminding yourself of a time when you actually did, because those kinds of overgeneralization thoughts are likely not true a lot of the time. So finding some evidence against it and reminding yourself, I actually did do this before, so I can get through it again. Yeah, it might be a little bit tricky, but I can get through it again. So you can have a look at some of these, but these are just examples of ways that you can reframe the thoughts. So let's go on then to these ones. And I want you all to think about for a minute how you would reframe these thoughts. So if a parent, you were thinking, I'm just weak, I'm a weak parent, what are some ways that you might be able to reframe that? And I'll give you a second to think about it. So there are lots of ways to reframe any of these thoughts, and whatever way works for you and makes you feel better as an individual is going to be the right way to do it. But one way you could say here is, instead of perceiving yourself as weak, saying, I'm a gentle and calming presence for my daughter, right? Focusing on the positive aspects of being more of a gentle person. I don't have enough patience. I mean, none of us really do. So reminding yourself of that right off the hop. So think about this one for a second. So this one, you might say something like, I'm getting better at being patient. I'm working on it. I'm more patient than I used to be, right? Or the simple one, and this is one I've heard a lot from parents in various forms. The bad could be, some swear word of your choice. But I definitely have heard this a lot from parents, where they just kind of unequivocally say, I'm just not good at this. I'm a bad parent. So what are some of the things you could say to yourself here instead? So just a couple of examples. I'm doing the best I can, or I did XYZ for my child already, and that really helped him out. Okay, so there's lots of ways that you can dispute or reframe, or both, your thoughts. So here's an example, our second example of mom in Walmart with her son, and we're going to reframe her thought this time about the situation. Instead of thinking and focusing on, oh my gosh, everyone's staring at us, saying, my son isn't the only kid who does this. I can ride this out. I've done it before, right? Now, I'm not going to pretend that she's not still going to be embarrassed about him throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of Walmart, but she might have a little less embarrassment. She might be more calm. She might feel a little more confident. And she also might be able to see the humor in the situation. I mean, might be a bit of a stretch for some of you, but sometimes, that being able to kind of reframe will allow you to step back and be able to see it in a little bit of a different light. So then, instead of avoiding the Walmart next time completely, she's going to try again next week, including some preventative strategies for problem behavior. So this mom is going to do a much better job, and she's not going to be avoiding a difficult situation because of thoughts and feelings she's having about it. So affirmations then, here are just some examples. This is the second thing you can do besides reframing to help encourage yourself to have helpful thoughts. It's basically about finding ways to boost yourself up, boost up your confidence. These are things you can say to yourself. Everyone does this. It's really highly personal. You may choose to focus on specific attributes of your parenting style and what you are good at, or things that you have recently accomplished with your child. Or you might be, you know, like a little more general, like I'm a big fan of let's do this, or I got this before difficult situations. One thing you want to keep in mind is it's good to start your day saying some of these things to yourself. So if you can pick 2 or 3 that will be helpful to you, that make you feel good and confident as a parent, then go for it. These should really be, it's really important that they're specific and that they are obviously positive and framed in an I am, not a I will be. So in a definite kind of I am sort of tense. So give some of those a try as well. And you may even want to couple it with a superhero power pose. So this was Andrea Lee and I ran a Raise Me Up program in the summertime at DSRF for some of our adults with teens and adults with Down syndrome. That was about she did a section on comprehensive sexual education, and I did a section on boosting their self-esteem. And these were our socially distant power poses that we came up with. So you can actually couple a superhero pose if you want with your affirmations. I highly recommend it. It'll be very fun. So we're going to finish off there. Here are a few resources, some references, and I just wanted to finish with a positive affirmation for all of you in that you're awesome, you can do this, you're doing an amazing job in a very difficult situation. And if you ever need any more support or you have questions for me, I would be more than happy to answer them. Here's my email. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching these videos, and hopefully I'll hear from some of you. Take care.